and welcome to another episode of Paintabilities. I'm Shelly James, and in today's lesson we're going to cover how to take a photograph that you've selected to paint and turn it into a sketch that you can then use to create your painting with. I'm excited to bring this new lesson to you. If you are just now joining me, please go back and watch the first two lessons where I suggest how to find photographs that you would like to paint from, and then what to do with those photographs once you've selected one so that you are ready to paint with it. Let's begin today's lesson now by getting overhead, and I will share with you how I create a sketch from a photograph that I've chosen. Here's the photograph that I've chosen to create a painting from. It's created by my husband, David James, who is a professional photographer, and this is of a location called Multnomah Falls, which is near Portland, Oregon. I really love this painting because it's got some interesting options for creating rock walls and water and a bridge that's an amazing structure going over this immense waterfall. So first thing I want to do is show you, as I mentioned in lesson 2, how to take this photograph and modify it so that you can create the painting that you see in your mind's eye as you're looking at this photo. While this is a beautiful photograph, it's very tall and thin, and I actually would like to create a painting that fits on something that's a little more standard size in terms of canvas. And so I'm going to show you how we can get it to that point and follow some of those tips and tricks that I shared with you in lesson 2. So first of all, this being a very tall and narrow photograph, I want to take and crop it down so that I can get it to the size that I can work with. So I've kind of done that already, but I'm going to show you how I do a few things. So first of all, I'm on my iPad. You can do this in most standard photo editing software on most devices. In my iPad photo editor, I have the ability to edit the photo, so right up here, and then I'm going to adjust it in terms of size and angle. Okay, so right here where I have crop, I'm going to choose that. And then over here on the right, I have some abilities to adjust the angles to tilt and tip the photo. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to select this one that allows me to vertically tilt my photograph, because when you're taking a photo from below, it might not be the best angle in which you want to create your painting. So I can slide this dial up and down, and as you can see, it kind of adjusts the angle degree of the photograph. Okay, so what I'm going to do is bring this more forward. All right, and notice how it's divided. Remember the rule of thirds that we talked about? Notice how it's kind of divided that in a grid as I'm doing this, okay? So as I'm doing that, I'm going to be looking at, am I kind of in those thirds? I'm pretty close. I've got some interesting items in each third of the picture. But again, it's too tall. So now what I want to do is actually crop it down. So I'm going to grab this corner right here, and I'm going to pull that down. It's a very tall waterfall in the background, but I want to really focus on the bridge and the foreground waterfall and the water hitting in the pool below. Okay, so now I've cropped that down. It's probably still a little bit too tall, and I can look at my thirds division here and see, all right, so I've got the 3 elements are still within those thirds, the horizontal thirds, if you will, going up and down the picture. Now I'm going to have to bring this down just a little more, and I kind of figured this out in advance, but just to let you know, I need to bring that down a little more. And I can make adjustments just with my eye as I'm creating this sketch. But that pretty much has me in a good position to create my painting and fit it onto a normally, like this happens to be a 12 by 16 wrapped canvas that I want to put this on. Okay, so we're ready to work with that. I'm just going to go ahead and click done. All right, and then the next thing I did was I adjusted the color to black and white so that I could get an understanding of where all my shadows and shading and dark areas were, as opposed to my light areas. So over here where it says filters, I'm going to tap that. And then down here, as I scroll up, remember I talked about in the previous lesson, you can look at cool tones and warm tones to get a little bit different a few different ideas for coloring. Because you don't have to keep everything exactly as it's shown in nature. You can take some poetic license, if you will, or artistic license, and adjust some colors to fit what you would like to create. All right, so when I get down here to monochromatic, that's what I want, to see those darks and lights, okay? So you don't have to have a real sophisticated set of equipment to get yourself set up easily and ready to create your painting. So this is where I want to be, and this is what I'm going to create my sketch from when it comes to laying things out and fitting within the confines of my canvas. Now, if you're painting on a canvas that's not already wrapped and not a standard size, then you can make adjustments to fit any size canvas you want, okay? I just happen to be working on that type of readily available material, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and tap down on this, and now you can see when I make the menus go away, this is what we're going to be creating the sketch from, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and set this aside where I can see it. I actually did print this out, and I want you to see what the difference is. Remember I talked before about how things don't print the same as they look on a screen? So look at the detail. I have a pretty good color printer, and you can really see the detail on the screen, even in black and white, versus seeing it come out on the printer. You're not really seeing all of that detail. However, it's a decent way to be able to see the darks and lights that I want to emphasize in my shading and shadowing areas. Okay? All right, so let's now get into creating that sketch. In this lesson, we're going to complete the sketch, and then in our next lesson, we will actually paint the photograph from that sketch, or paint the painting from that photograph sketch. Okay? Another good reason for printing out the grayscale or monochromatic picture is that you can then use that technique that I mentioned about sketching. If it's difficult for you to sketch and see spatial relations and where things go, then you can take a printed photograph that's roughly the same size in a smaller scale, and you can fold it into fourths or even into something less than that. All right, I can get it down to even smaller sections by folding it evenly. Okay, so now I've got 8 rectangles that I can work from, and it helps me lay things out a little better. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and set this aside, and what I will then do is I will take my canvas. So this is the canvas that I'm going to be painting on, and underneath it I have my sketch pad. So you don't have to have a sophisticated set of pencils to sketch something out to create a painting from. So don't feel like you have to be a master drawer. But for design purposes and fitting on my canvas, I'm going to just go around my edges with my pencil and make sure that I have the size mapped out so I don't make things bigger than will fit on my canvas. Okay, and that might just be me thinking that's necessary, but that's just kind of how I operate. Okay, so the next thing I can do is I can take my ruler, and this happens to be a 12-inch ruler, which is pretty standard. And I can then go, and it's actually got a rolling bar on it, and I can come up here and find my center point at the top of my canvas, or top of my paper. All right, so 6 inches is going to be right about there. And then I can just roll it down, mark another 6 inches, roll it down, and I'm just following along this. And I'm not, it doesn't have to be perfectly precise. Oh, you know what? The 6-inch mark is right here. Oops. We'll come back up here and do that correctly. There we go. So it's not these. It's also a good idea to have an adjustable or retractable white eraser that gets rid of marks. When you're creating your sketch, it's a good idea not to push too hard with the pencil so that you can easily erase, because when we sketch, we put lines sometimes like this for demarcation, but we don't actually want them in our design. So later on, we want to be able to erase them easily. All right, so I'm just going to very lightly, oops, that's too light, you're not going to see that. That's better. Very lightly draw the center line, just so I can see where my center line is going to hit and matches up with the one in my picture. Okay, so now I can see, if I take my picture and I hold it like this, right, I can see that more than half of my bridge is in this upper left quadrant, right? About half of my waterfall in this front area is centered on that center line. All right, and then coming down here, I can see that my splash point is mostly in the lower left quadrant. So it just helps you kind of get some of those mechanical things laid out a little easier, okay? Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and do these marks going this way. Yeah, so I'm gonna come down. There we go. And so I know this is going to be 16 inches long. So breaking that up into fourths, I'm going to put marks every 4 inches. Okay, and then do the same thing on the other side. Every 4 inches. Okay, and then in the middle. And again, this is just a rough guesstimate sort of thing, okay? So then you can just line up and quickly do those lines there. There we go. Okay, so now I have my drawing broken up into my 8 sections. I don't want to say quadrants because it's not quadrants anymore. Okay, so first thing we want to do is let's look at the foreground here and identify where our rock walls are coming in and where the span of the bridge sits. Okay, so if you look at where it comes off the paper right here, okay, and if you look at this as a whole, you could even, if you really want to get precise, you could even fold this and we can get this into 16ths, right? So right where that line right here is where the bridge hits the wall, right? So if you're halfway into this quadrant here and then you come down, not quite halfway, that's where your rock wall is going to start making its slope in, and down to this point where then the waterfall just falls. Okay, so if you think about the water not being there, this rock comes here, cuts across, and then back up like that. Okay, so that's the main thing we're trying to create right now in this sketch. So I know, as I said, this is coming off, and I put that fold there, so halfway in between, if this is my eyeballed center line, halfway in between there and the far right edge is where my rock wall is going to go off my canvas. So I can then easily come through here, and then I know that the top of my bridge is going to be right here on this center line, hitting that rock wall. Okay, and then we need to come all the way down to where the water starts to flow, and that's where this rock wall is going to kind of end, sort of. Okay, so looking at where this hits right here, okay, we can look in this section, which would be this area right here, and it's about halfway down, a little bit higher than halfway down, and it's about halfway across. If you can see where those folds are between here and here, comes right in there. Okay, so I can come right to this point halfway, and then come halfway in, and then come down. So this this would be that dividing line, and then come down only halfway to that. Okay, so I'm coming right about here and right about there. Remember, it doesn't have to be super precise. You're just looking for hitting the area. Okay, so then I just need to kind of bring this point to this point. And so if you take your pencil in your hand and position your hand to sit somewhere in the midpoint between this point and this point, and then you can just rotate to create that curve. Okay, roughly. Now looking at this, it kind of goes in and out and jags around, but this gives you a rough outline for the purpose of design. Okay, now we kind of want to mirror that on this other side. That's pretty much an even split. I've got the bridge sitting almost exact dead center. I said there's a little bit left of center. Okay, so let's come over to this side and basically mirror that. And again, I can fold this again into the center, and you will see that again my bridge hits like just like it did here, right just past that fold line right there. And then again we're up. So I can come over here, I can look at this distance, and then I like to use fingers. Okay, so I have a little bit larger fingers than most people, or most women. So 2 fingers over from the left, or from the right, I'm going to come 2 fingers over from the left, and that's going to be my top point where the waterfall goes off. Okay, and then 2 fingers down, roughly, maybe a little less than 2 fingers down from the top, and 2 fingers in from that point is where my bridge hits. Okay, so we're going to go 2 fingers in right here, and slightly less than 2 fingers down right there, and that's going to give me a rough point to where my bridge is going to hit my rock. Okay, and we can do the same thing down here. Now remember, this is pretty close to being halfway, right, centered on that halfway mark. So I can come from here and kind of mirror. So again, a little more than 2 fingers tight. I can come over here, a little more than 2 fingers tight, and a little less than 2 fingers down, right? So a little more than 2 fingers over to here, a little less than 2 fingers down, and you can put that dot right about there. Okay, so this is the top of our waterfall. This is where the water is going to fall over and down the face of the cliff. Okay, so now it's just a matter of bringing this in here, and I'm not a good left-handed person, so what you can do, let's move this out of the way, is turn this way. And remember I said position your hand in between the 2 points roughly and pivot. Just like that. And then we can keep going right up off the top of our canvas. Okay, so that's a pretty good balance right there. I'd say come pretty darn close to where I think it would look correct. Now, from this point then, we want to kind of finish our foreground. We've got 2 things in the foreground. We've got this bridge up here, and then we've got where the water is hitting into the pond or into the pool below, all right? And the back wall here, right, which we'll get more detail from our actual picture to know exactly where that sits. So if we look at this and we go to our original, take the filter back to the original color. That's it. So if we look at that, then you will see this actually goes quite a ways back. Where the gray hits back here is where it disappears into the pond, okay? So this is actually pretty accurate right in here and right back in here. And then this is just all worn away in this area here. Okay, and that's our dark that we want to make sure we manage when we create the painting. Okay, so let's come down and we're going to look at how far is this. It's into the bottom quadrants, into these areas down here, and then it's about halfway down on either side is where it touches. So I'm going to come halfway to here, and I'm going to make a mark, and I'm going to come halfway to here and make a mark. All right, again, it's nature and it's rock and it's water, so it doesn't have to be exactly perfect. Now, how far over do we come before we start going in behind the waterfall? All right, so look at where this line falls. That's where it then starts to make that curve behind. So that's where we made that other fold, which is halfway down this right here. And then it's up slightly from here. So I'd say a third of the way up from this point. Okay, so I'm trying to talk in terms of general locations so that you're not getting hung up on terminology. Okay, and I don't talk that way. So, all right, so roughly from here to here, it's about a third, right? If you took this and you said, okay, that's 3 fingers, that'll work. 3 fingers, so if we go up a finger, maybe come just a little bit south of that. There we go, okay? And then we don't need this line. But what we want to do with that then is kind of curve it around behind and up towards where it goes behind the waterfall. Okay, and then on this other side, look where that comes, right in here, right? It wanders through and then it takes that turn behind the waterfall right here, okay? So we have this mark here, and then this is our halfway point, and that's about, 1 finger down by the looks of it. So we're going to find our halfway point here. We're going to come down about a finger right there. Okay. And we can kind of meander that over, right? And I'd say the same thing here. This doesn't have to be perfectly rounded. So we're going to kind of meander that over, hit this point, and then it starts to come right up to this line, and that's where it then starts to go behind the water. So we can come right up to here, just kind of following that direction and angle right to this point, right? So it's disappearing. I want you to see this right here is in front or closer to you than this right here where it's going behind it. So it's kind of worn away in a bit of an odd angle. So then once you cross this line, that's where it starts to go behind that waterfall right there. Okay, so you bring this here and then it takes that dive back. All right, so then at this point you have water crashing down here and it's hitting this pool. So find your center line, right? This is the center line. So we've got a pretty good line up here on how this is hitting, right? It's just about a finger over the center line on the right, and most of it, I'd say it's a good 3 fingers on the left. Now looking at where it's hitting the bottom, right? We're pretty darn close to the bottom. I would say it's going to hit right about here. Again, I'm just kind of eyeballing this point. And then it takes, look at the angle. It takes this wide turn, like almost a complete right angle turn to create that splash line here and here. Okay, so we can kind of sketch this in loosely. It has a little bit of like spray here, and then it's more dense hitting at this point, and then takes this spray out and the right angles to the left and right. Okay. All right, so we're darn close to hitting the end of this. So at this point now we just need to bring in the distance between here and here. But notice what's happening. It's hitting some walls here, here, and here. Okay. This is where you have to decide, do you want this much detail or not? I really think this is interesting what's happening here. So look at where this happens. It goes from just below the center line to about halfway, and it comes in. Okay, and where it's coming in, it's almost to the vertical center line. So horizontal center line just below, and just to the right of the vertical center line coming down. So I'd say right about here, right? You want to line up and look at it gets wider, right? The further it falls down, right? Because we're wide here and then it narrows as it falls, right? So we're going to come, let this slip down until we hit this point where it's almost to this midline. And then here, where it's below the horizontal midline, it takes this kind of drop, another drop, and then it lines up with where we come down to the bottom. Can you see that? So we've got this, and then there's a space, and then this, and in here we have several of these, and then it comes down. So I think that's kind of cool. All right, so then on this side we have something like that, but not quite the same. Notice how it goes from here and then comes over to the left, and then it starts to narrow, and you've actually got an open space right in here where it's misty. So we want to drop down from here slightly, and then we're going to take a little bit of a jog as it spills over. And then this is about, just a little higher than this center line right here. We're going to go up and down, and then below the center line. So this is a big space right in here, and then it comes back up again. So this is all dropping and then accumulating here, and then it kind of comes in a misty staircase back over to the right. So just little wisps of water falling, and then the actual heavy fall is right in here. Okay, so that's really kind of interesting. So we've got some water that's going to spill over this way. It's going to be misty here, and then it gets heavier right in here. And we actually have, see this line right here? We've got a kind of a split. So there's something up here, probably a rock or something, that's causing the water to kind of split and then come back together below the midpoint. Okay, so we've got some interesting things here that we can include in our painting once we get there. Okay, so that's the water. Now we want to look at the bridge. And this is where I talked about in last week's lesson how you don't necessarily have to do all the detail to give the viewer the idea of something. So see all of these uprights in the fencing along the bridge? You do not have to paint every single one of those to give the idea. And actually where the water is makes it a really good reason not to necessarily paint them all, but you do have the top and bottom railings on the bridge that will help you. Okay, so first thing I want to do is let's turn our drawing so we have it like this, and I have my points where my bridge top touches both sides of the rock wall. So I'm just going to take my straight edge. I like to be a little more precise with things like bridges and walkways because they're man-made. Okay, then we want to look at dropping this down and then creating this arch. All right, now this is probably going to be my most challenging part of it because it's not that big. Okay, so if we look at, let's fold this in half again. Everything sits in like the upper half of this section. Right, see this line falls right where the bottom of that bridge arch is. So if I find halfway in this, so let's say I come down from here, come down from here. So I know this is 4 inches, I'm going to come down 2, right? And that's my halfway. So everything from this point above is going to be the walkway and below is going to be the arch, okay? So if I just roll this over to where it hits the rock wall, find my 2 inches, make a mark there, roll this back, find my 2 inches where it hits the rock wall, make a mark there, okay? Then we can come right in here, and that will give us the bottom of our bridge where we have our railings, okay? And so from this point, we can do the arches, right? Now, they are taller at the widest point than the bridge itself, almost twice as tall. So I'm just going to take a little liberty here and go down to, I'd say about, well, so if I know this gap right here is, yeah, it's about 1 inch. So if I come to 3 inches and come just a little bit lower than that, so let's say 3 1/4 where it hits the rock, okay, and over here 3 1/4, right about there, okay. Then I can come below. So I want you to see here, we've got the span of the bridge comes like this because of the angle we're at, and then it gets narrow here, and then this part cuts in front of it like that. Okay, so we're going to come from here, and we're going to drop down a little bit. Well, actually, let's do this. We're going to come from right here, and we're going to come over and hit that wall right there. So down just slightly from my center line here, and then here, and hit that wall, okay? Now, what's going to happen is, right, the wall is here, but this side of the span actually comes in more, all right? See, because it lines up just inside where this part hits. Okay, So we're right here, and over here, same thing. So then we have an upright, 1, 2, 3 of them, 1, 2, 3 of them. Okay, so divide them in two, right about there. Divide that in half, right about there. Divide this in half, right about here. Okay, same thing over here. Right about there-ish. Yeah. There we go. Okay, so now we have our bridge, and under here we want to add this underside view. This is going to come over and hit right there. So it's attached to this side of the rock wall, and then it comes down here. Okay, so the last thing remaining is the railing in the bottom, and then there are two main posts here and here. See those? So that splits right here on either side, and they come right in here. Yeah, right about here. So remember, these are sketches, and they are easily adjusted because I can see right away I've got one thing I need to fix. Okay, so we're going to come, so same distance, right about here. Is it exact? No. And I'm not going for perfect on this. That's what I don't want you to stress. Okay, so those are the two main posts. And then it goes into all the little posts in between. Again, don't have to do every single one or even all the way down to give the impression that they're there. Okay, so first thing I noticed was where I put these is not quite right. So let's erase those and we'll fix this. And it's the architecture stuff that's probably the most challenging. So I'm not surprised that I'm having a little hard time. So we want to come from this post and go to the right of it. So this is really more sitting right about here, and then here, and then here. Okay. So now we adjust our bridge span slightly, and we're going to come over here, right, this one right here, and we're going to adjust that bridge span slightly, flatten it out just a little bit, and then we know we have this one that's as far away from that as this one is, and then in between. Okay, and then they have these Y's. Now, will my bridge pass engineering structural tests? Probably not. Okay, so that's a little better. Now, where did I put my eraser? Here it is. So let's get rid of this. All right, and this, because I want to adjust those, okay? So we're going to come, it's from the other side for perspective, and we're going to hit there, and this is going to be more flat, right? And then we're going to hit there, and that's going to come over. And we can get rid of that. You'll see some of this behind here, but not so much. Okay? So now we have our basic bridge construction. Now I'm going to come in here, right above it, and put our rail. And here, put our base. Okay. And then we can adjust our hill accordingly. Okay. So we're pretty darn close, I'd say. Actually, you're not going to see this, so I don't know why I keep putting that in there. From the angle we're at, we're going to come and hit right there. This is going to come like that. Okay, so the last thing that I want to do is address some of these darker areas just so I can point them out. Okay, so under this bridge is one of them. All right. So under here, I want you to look at this again. Underneath the bridge, right up here, right, we've got this arches, and then you're seeing the bottom of the bridge from underneath because of the position that we're at, okay? Right there. Okay, so this is going to be dark, and you can just kind of sketch it in dark like that. And then under the bridge itself is another one, okay? Now, notice the waterfall falling from the upper level, right? This is going to come from the right of center. See, the center is right here, and this is falling here, and then it's halfway across there. So from here down, and from here, yeah, halfway across this one. So it's a quarter of the way across. And notice the angle. It's spraying this way. It pools up here, and then it moves over and comes down this way. So I'm going to come from, let's find our quarter of the way from right about here. And it's coming, oops, let's pull this in just slightly so you can see it's coming from behind the bridge. And so now I can see that I want to maybe adjust my rock wall on this side. There we go. So maybe there's a little more angle there. There, because it comes from under the bridge. There we go. Now this side is pretty much staying pretty darn straight through here. Okay? So there we have our back waterfall back here. Right? Now that we have everything spaced out, it's simply a matter of, well, before I go to erase, I want you to see, so as we come from behind the waterfall here, right in this area, coming down to this point, this is all going to be dark, right? And same thing on this side, coming from right about here, this is all going to be dark. And then the other dark thing is going to be this pond area through here. Okay, so just keep that in mind as we get ready to paint this. So now I can take my eraser and I can get rid of all these lines. So that you can at least see the sketch. But you know what, actually I'm not going to do that because it makes sense to keep them So now we understand where all the key elements are in this design, and we are ready to transfer this to our canvas and begin creating our painting, which we will do next time. So be sure to come back and join me as we take this from sketch to painting. Thank you for watching Paintabilities. See you next time.